Hello, my name is Wendy Love Edge, and I'd like to welcome you to the Bulldozer Health Show. In this episode, I'll be interviewing Dr. Susan Sisley, medical doctor. Dr. Sisley serves as the principal investigator for the only FDA-approved randomized controlled trial looking at the use of whole plant marijuana in combat veterans with treatment-resistant post-traumatic stress syndrome, or PTSD. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
Oh, I'm really pleased to speak with you. So, Susan, how did you become interested in investigating medical marijuana for PTSD?
I think it was the patients in my practice who taught me. I finally started listening to them and not being so judgmental when they would, they were reluctantly disclosing to me over the last 10 years that they're using this plant, and many of them reported that they were utilizing it successfully and more successfully than any of the meds that I was prescribing to them. Mm-hmm. So initially I was, very dismissive of their claims, and, eventually though the reports from not just very credible patients but from the collateral history from family members was so compelling that I couldn't ignore it, and I finally started to listen to them. I know that's kind of a new, seems to be a unique concept, unfortunately, in medical care that, we physicians often forget that our patients, know quite a bit about their own bodies and how they respond to things. And I was finally able to open my mind enough to hear their stories and start to, learn from them. They taught me about the different phenotypes that they were using to combat different medical ailments. And like I said, I'm still skeptical. I'm not sold, and I don't consider myself pro marijuana by any stretch, but I do consider myself pro marijuana research, and I really feel strongly that we owe it to these patients to at least study the plant in a rigorous, controlled environment.
Right, and study the whole plant. I know that the pharmaceutical companies have come up with a pharmaceutical pill, but that's a completely different thing, isn't it, from using the whole plant? Or that's what you're looking at, I guess, one of the things.
Yeah, that's what we hope to uncover is what is the efficacy of the natural plant. The National Institute on Drug Abuse just announced that they have identified the 138th cannabinoid in marijuana. So the notion that there are 138 phytocannabinoids working together synergistically with all these other bioactive compounds like terpenes and flavonoids, and so we now the entourage effect, all these compounds working together in concert to create what seems to be a really remarkable therapeutic benefit. That this has been well described now, and I think that it's clear that when you try to isolate a specific cannabinoid out of the natural plant, that you lose the real the remarkable efficacy of the entourage effect, and so that's why I think it's like taking out the intelligence and leaving the wisdom behind. Big Pharma has been trying now for since the endocannabinoid system was first uncovered in the 80s, they've been pouring millions of dollars to try to replicate the efficacy of the natural plant, and they can't. They're just not coming close. And you're seeing patients who will try these meds and realize that they're just a very poor substitute, and they usually end up right back on the natural plants.
I think it's quite remarkable that the FDA is behind this study and willing to put some dollars into it. It seems like that hasn't occurred at all. So why this study at this time, do you think?
So it's important for the public to know that FDA has not been the blockade in this work. We submitted the study design in 2010, and we had FDA approval by April 2011. So it's all these other ridiculous layers of government red tape that only marijuana is subject to. Those are the things that have systematically impeded marijuana research in this country. And one of the biggest barriers that you identified is the funding is a real issue because the government, through NIDA, they only fund studies looking at harmful side effects and addiction potential. So any studies like ours that dare, to have the audacity to say we want to study efficacy, how effective is marijuana in treating, those are the studies that get put into a black hole, basically. They get put into a permanent review process where they generally never emerge. And the only reason our study has been able to move forward and finally after 5 years is just the immense amount of public support, patient activism, veteran activism, all of that has finally helped us kick down the doors of the government and get to a point where we're almost ready to implement. The only thing we're waiting on now is marijuana study drugs.
Well, that's all very interesting, and we should bring in actually our other guests now. You were talking about patient activism and patients that have helped to push this forward. And we also have with us on the show today Butch Williams, and he's the president of White Mountain Health Center in Sun City, Arizona. Welcome, Butch.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here.
Could you tell us a little bit about what you do as the president of the health center and also as a patient, what your viewpoint is?
Yeah, absolutely. As the president of White Mountain Health Center, my role is the day-to-day operations. I am one of the ones that is literally hands-in. So I work specifically with all the employees and patients at the dispensary. I also have a cultivation site which I run, and I actually have a horticulture degree from Oregon State University. So we're very, very, very solid with our product and our way of procuring our product.
And that's really important. I know I'm a cannabis patient and I have a caregiver who grows for me, and I feel really confident with the product that I'm getting. That's an issue in the States where it's not legal. People don't know what they're getting, but so what you're doing is really important.
Well, yes, it is, and I appreciate that you acknowledge that as well, because there's a lot of people that don't understand it is a medicine, so there needs to be controls. These controls, especially when you're growing, need to take place so that you're getting the same medicine to these patients each time. Any variable can change the biology of a plant and how it's being producing the cannabinoids. So it's important to have those controls. I actually got into this 12 years ago as a patient. I'm a rheumatoid arthritic patient, and I was prescribed some serious medications in upwards of 10 different prescriptions, from Plaquenil all the way to methotrexate. Methotrexate is a type of chemotherapy.
I was on that myself. I understand. Yeah.
Well, I actually had to get 2 kidney surgeries from that.
Wow.
No other prescription drugs were able to even enter my body because I was so weak and ill. That I even asked the doctor what's next, and the doctor surprisingly said, hey, I have a colleague of mine that writes scripts for medical marijuana in California. And I did my research after laughing at him, and I couldn't find anything that told me not to do it. And so since then, I've made this my journey. I moved to California, my whole family, and we did this together, and I've been healthy since.
Wow, that's a great testament to the medicine. I'm so glad that you're better. The fact that it's a natural plant, to me, and with the endocannabinoid system, it's working with the body to help it do what it knows how to do, which is to heal itself, really.
Which is so important for the research that Dr. Sue Sisley is doing, so we can get these statistics of why these are working, why these working together, and we lack that so much in the medical field.
We do, and I just want to say, one thing that really grabbed me about Dr. Sisley when I was doing my research on her is the fact that she's really putting patient needs first over all the political pressure that physicians get to not study or prescribe medicinal cannabis, especially in the whole plant form. So I'd like to turn back to Dr. Sisley. I really applaud you, Dr. Sisley. Thank you.
Oh, well, I'm so grateful that anybody cares about this research? We've had an outpouring of relentless support from patients and just folks, the members of the public with common sense that realize that there is literally a war on science here. We're seeing, public policy being thwarted by folks who don't want objective data in this arena. And so, believe me, probably the best shout out we got was from Andy Weil. I don't know, Dr. Weil is the chair of the Integrative Medicine Department at the U of A, and he said something similar to what you just brought up after I was terminated and the research was, of course, terminated. He wrote an open letter to the media condemning President Hart and the administration for this very short-sighted decision, and he said, that we put patients' needs above political dogma, and it's shameful that the U of A, that all three universities ultimately turned their back on this research, on a fully funded study with all the federal government approvals that was federally legal. Not a single university would embrace this vital work. So it is pretty sad. The universities have really lost their backbone. They've lost their soul. The soul of a public, taxpayer-supported university previously was all about creating a sanctuary for this kind of cutting-edge research, controversial work that couldn't be done anywhere else.
Dr. Sisley, I just want to say, because some people who are watching or listening may not realize that you were terminated from the University of Arizona after you were a faculty member in great standing for 7 years, and they terminated you and stopped the study. And that's what you were referring to, correct?
Exactly, yeah. We were terminated in June of last year. I was stripped of all three of my contracts there on the same day without giving any reason why, no fair hearing, no due process. And it was interesting that some of the biggest, outcry around the world was from, scientists who were also at the forefront of controversial research, whether it was climate scientists or other sort of, stem cell scientists who all experienced similar treatment at their universities, trying to do this, you're in the crosshairs of all the opponents that don't value this kind of science. So.
Right. I have one final question for you before we wrap up. As you know, I'm sure, since the drug war started back with Richard Nixon, in the early 70s, the drug has been classified as a Schedule I drug with no medical value, and it still stands today. What are your thoughts about that changing?
I think we're right on the cusp of seeing that happen. It just depends how much political courage these federal electeds are going to have to finally do the right thing. I think Sanjay Gupta really said it best, that the DEA, we have been systematically misled by the DEA for the last 70 plus years, and finally people are recognizing that there are hundreds of controlled trials published in peer-reviewed journals confirming the therapeutic benefit of this medicine. And so I tell you, I'm skeptical because I'm trained in a conservative medical model where we don't covet anything except FDA-approved meds. But I also acknowledge that there is a very strong body of evidence that already supports the use of this. It's crucial that not just that the drug be rescheduled, but that the DEA be required to license other expert marijuana growers in the country. It is shameful that, the University of Mississippi has a government-enforced monopoly on the only federally legal supply of marijuana for marijuana research. The fact that I am required to buy marijuana from NIDA only is an abomination, and every taxpayer should be outraged by this because we just put $68 million into this failed monopoly. I mean, the fact is I'm waiting 17 months now for marijuana study drugs when any other expert grower in the country could have had marijuana grown to spec for us within 3 months. So that's something I want your listeners to know, is that ending the NIDA monopoly and forcing the DEA to license other growers has to be a top priority, and that won't be fixed just by rescheduling the drug. That has to be an independent public policy change.
Well, thank you for opening my eyes to that as well, and we will definitely put that out there. I really appreciate you both joining me today. Thank you so much, Dr. Susan Sisley and Butch Williams, for being on the show today.
You bet. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was an honor.
Bulldozer Health Incorporated is a 501c3 nonprofit organization and healthcare reform initiative. You can find us at bulldozerhealth.org. Take back your health, America.